Welcome to the show, beautiful people. Remember to join me right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, every Saturday night from 7 to 8 p.m. Or go to 710WOR.iheart.com/A Moment of Zen to watch fully uploaded episodes as of Monday morning. Also, please make sure to follow me on social media at ZenSams. That's Zen with an X. And you can also text the word collaboration or feature me to 917-575-2321. Again, that number is 917-575-2321. Today's show is brought to you by our very own Romulus Entertainment right here in the heart of New York City on the East Coast, and the best Italian food, Vice Cucina in Midtown Manhattan. They're opening up in Soho very soon. And of course, the amazing designs of Helen Yarmack International, best furs and fine stylish jewelry right here on 5th Avenue and 57th Street. Also welcoming to the Moment of Zen sponsor family, NYC's very own and trusted band of investment bankers and brokers, none other than Revere Securities. Now, today we have an incredible show, and I'm going to dive right into it. Actor and longtime pal Paul Ben-Victor, best known for playing Greek mobster Spiros Vondas Vondopoulos on the HBO drama series The Wire. He's going to stop in and chat about his latest projects and the new movie Monster that came out last week starring Calvin Harrison Jr., Jennifer Hudson, and Jeffrey Wright. What an incredible movie that is. I'm also very excited to be chatting with book author Toby Rubenstein. Her book is now out, and it's called The House of Faith and Fashion. It's available on Amazon. We'll chat about her battle with stage 4 cancer, her comeback, her new lease on life, and how the universe always balances things out. Now, my love for Atlantic City will unfold right before your very eyes and ears, depending if you're listening or watching. The lead writer for PlayNJ.com, covering Atlantic City casinos, online gambling, and sports betting, Dave Danzis will be stopping by. And I heard him a few days ago on Frank Morano's show, The Other Side of Midnight on WABC. It was a great segment. So if you're ever up 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., check out Frank Morano. Up next, we have my friend Rich Valdez. He's host of This is America with Rich Valdez. He is the voice of Hispanic conservatives, and I'm so excited to chat with him. Up next. You're listening to A Moment of Zen. I'm your host, Zen Sams. We'll be right back after this.
If you've missed out dining in New York City for the past year, it's time to visit the legendary Vice Cucina. Located in the heart of Midtown, Vice specializes in blending delicious Northern Italian and American cuisine with dishes such as the incredible taglione lobster, ravioli masala, ossobuco, and pappardelle al telefono, along with many other mouthwatering offerings. You deserve a great night out. Call Vice Cucina 212-757-2600 or online at vicecucina.com.
Welcome back, beautiful people. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Now, coming up, we have my friend Rich Valdez. He's the host of This is America with Rich Valdez. And here's a very proud friend moment. He kicked off the new year by being in the top spot on the Apple podcast chart. So that's a great thing. Now, This is America, I have to point out, is a WABC original podcast, and Rich is the voice of Hispanic conservatives. He was also one of the directors of operations at Project Veritas, and is a producer and regular guest on the host of the nationally syndicated Mark Levine Show. He's recently founded, and this is one of the better parts of this interview, a nonprofit social media impact organization to educate American voters of Hispanic heritage on the importance of liberty in the free markets. And it's called the Libertad Agenda, libertadagenda.org. Now, welcome to the show, Rich. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and where you're from and all that good stuff. Very happy to have you on.
Thank you, Zen. Good morning. It was a tremendous introduction. It's my honor to be with you. It's a fantastic show you've got.
Thank you so much. Now, you're of Puerto Rican heritage, correct?
Yeah, both my parents are born on the island. My dad from Caguas, my mom from Bayamón.
Wow, Cayos and Bayamón. I've been to Puerto Rico. I actually celebrate New Year's and Christmas 4 years in a row at the El San Juan Hotel. It's like a family tradition, and nice. Our production company, Romulus Entertainment, has filmed lots of movies there, especially during the hurricane. So we're very familiar with the island, and we stayed true to the people and employing them during the hurricanes. But either way, that's where you're from. Now, I want to pick your brain a little bit because you have a great audience. You have a lot of people that follow you. And thank God. And your podcast is one of the better. You're very well versed, and you're very well educated, and your opinions are very poignant. Now, do you think that the Latin population, specifically those who are Republican, are afraid to admit it based on the current cancel culture?
No, I don't actually. I think what's happened is that people have gotten used to just living their lives and being free. And when people are just living their lives freely, just going to work, taking care of their children, putting some money in savings, doing all of that stuff, they listen to the news sparingly. They catch a report here and there. And when you start to hear things like Trump is against all Hispanics, Republicans are the enemy of Hispanics, and you hear all of this propaganda, I think they tend to think, well, that's probably not good. Let me go for the other guy, because people typically rely on people like you and like me to help interpret the news that's out there as news commentators and whatnot. So I think people have bought into a tremendous lie for many, many years. And being that in a lot of Latin American countries, people come from serious oppression and they come to America and they see some liberty, they say, man, this isn't so bad. But I think in the era of Trump, people have really learned that, you know what, the media is not always telling the truth. And with that being said, I think I do agree with Trump. I like the fact that my bank account has grown more. I like the fact that more Hispanics became homeowners during Trump than they had in the 8 years prior. So I think these facts are speaking for themselves, and people are saying, you know what? It's time for me to really kind of embrace what I believe. Many Hispanics are pro-life. They love this country, which is why they risk life and limb to get here. And I think a lot more of them are saying, you know what? I don't need to hide this. I don't need to be afraid of this.
Very well said. And I think that that's why you represent the group of people that you do, because that is not just a good voice, but it's a strong voice. Now, as a father to teenage kids, having a strong voice is extremely important. Otherwise, they'll step all over you. But you have two teenage daughters. You're a divorcee. You're a single dad. How hard has it been for you to stand by and watch some of the more liberal media platforms influence the minds of our Gen Zers?
Well, I guess I would use the cliche term, I got my work cut out for me, right? I think every now and again, thank God that, I literally was that guy that was teaching my kids about the Constitution when they were in kindergarten. And while they didn't get it, I tried to give them the most basic principles, letting them know the Constitution is not the rules of our land. It's basically saying that the government can't create rules on the people, and it's we, the people, that are in charge. So I think they've learned these elements of liberty as they grew up, and as they hear things that they don't think jibe with what they may have learned. And I'm not saying that they're conservative Republicans in any way. They're free thinkers and they do what they want. They can be whoever they want to be. I've never steered them to any political party. But they'll come to me and say, you know what, Dad, I heard this thing that said that, America's bad because of this and that and the other thing. And I think when they hear that, it sets off little alarms in their own head where they say, you know what, that just doesn't sound right, because we've seen our family. They know my mom. They know my dad. They know their own grandparents from their mom's side. And they've seen the struggle that they've had and how they've came up from poverty to higher levels of prosperity. So I think when they see that, they go, you know what, this place, America, is not so bad. We've seen so many good things happen here. And they realize that a lot of what they're hearing in the media on Snapchat and Instagram and whatnot, a lot of that stuff, again, is just propaganda. And thank God they're smart enough to kind of work through that.
And how old are your daughters?
15 and 19, two teenage daughters.
Those are tough ages.
It keeps me busy.
I could definitely sympathize. I have a stepdaughter who's 18 and a stepson who's 16, both
not far off.
Not far off. And my biological, she's 5.5, Alexa, but I'm definitely spread across many different generations. And I think that, and this is a question I always get, so I'm going to ask you, sure. Separate of your strong political beliefs and you have incredible Latino values. I'm Greek and my husband's Jewish, and we have quite a mix going on in our house. But do you think that being a father has been helpful in your career, or do you think that had you had a different trajectory, your values would have been, you would have had a different voice? Because I know that, and let me elaborate a bit more to be clear. When I gave birth, my moral compass went from 0 to 60 overnight. I was all about doing the right thing, being aware that I have a little shadow and somebody that's watching my every move, and it was game changing. How do you feel it helped or either didn't help you in your current situation as a huge radio host and popular podcaster?
Oh, thank you. You're kind. Here's the thing. Yeah, I think it totally changed, just like yours did. I mean, I was a young guy and I was rather conservative, just culturally. Like I didn't really hit the bar scene too much when I was 21 and whatnot. I got married at 22 and was married for 10 years. So my 20s were rather calm. I had my own business, and then I worked in a Fortune 10 company. So I didn't have your typical 20s. But what I will say is that, yeah, being a dad definitely changes things, because you no longer kind of worry about yourself. You kind of think, what is the impact this is going to have on my children? Sure, I can defend myself against different types of liberal propaganda that may come my way, but how will my kids be able to do that? And do I have to fight these fights for them, or prepare them for the fights, or both? So I think, and again, not that all of everything in life is politics. That's not necessarily what I'm saying, but I am saying just everything in general, things that, for example, the marijuana law that passed in New Jersey. One of the biggest caveats, and whether it was a caveat and they didn't realize it, or it was a trapdoor and it was intentional, was that minors who were caught with marijuana by the police, the new marijuana law in New Jersey says they could not be reported to their parents. So the judge could know, the police could know, but if you're 16 and you have weed inside your parents' car and you get caught with a DWI, they don't have to tell even the registered owner of the car. And to me, I thought, man, that just seems nonsensical. It just doesn't seem like that should be the law. And in fact, it is the law. So now they're trying to fix the law that they just spearheaded and rushed and rammed right through the New Jersey state legislature. And that's just one example of things. It just happened to be one that was in my mind, because it affected younger people. But there's many situations like that. And I think when you have situations like that, you don't care about that when you're 20 or even 35 and don't have kids. You're like, okay, whatever. How does that affect my taxes? You don't care. But when it's coming down to your children, or the potentiality of your children being impacted, you become a lot more concerned.
You're 100% accurate. I mean, that, number one, is alarming. So thank you for bringing that to light. But yes, these are the types of things that you would think would be better thought out, but with poor leadership in this tri-state area specifically, and with no end in sight, because you do have Congress at each other. They're more divided than they've ever been. And so it's alarming to me to see our great city go down this deep, dark hole. And unless somebody steps in really quickly and really changes things and makes us whole again, so to speak, because we really need to be governed by leaders that have our best values at heart, but clearly they don't. It's all about their bottom line. Two questions for you before we go, Rich. You're going on the road pretty soon, but who would you like to see as our next mayor?
Oh, I would love to see Curtis Sliwa as the next mayor. I mean, as a kid, I was a little kid riding the subway with my mom. Again, I grew up in Brooklyn, and before we moved to Jersey, I moved to Jersey when I was in 6th grade. So I did a lot of growing up in Jersey as well. But I remember being a little kid on the subway, and we were going from Brooklyn to Manhattan, or from Brooklyn to downtown Brooklyn. And two guys got into a fight. And they hadn't started physically fighting yet. There was a lot of bluster going on, a lot of bluffing. One guy was claiming to have a gun, and he was telling the guy he was going to shoot him. And I was like, oh, snap. And my mom pulled me closer and closer to her, on the subway bench. And the other guy just pulls out a knife, switchblade, and he's like, go for it. I don't believe you have a gun. And this is in a crowded subway car. And I remember this is what was happening in the early 80s when I was a little kid. And my mom looked at me and she said, these things are usually filled with the guardian angels. And she was a huge fan of the guardian angels. So I think, back then, crime was out of control, and the guardian angels did a tremendous job. Curtis Sliwa in particular, his leadership, his foresight, the courage that he showed to clean up the city that he grew up in, I think is something that is so needed right now. We need somebody who knows the streets, somebody who's got the courage, the ability, and the know-how to take on the massive crime problem, who understands the political players and isn't afraid to tell it like it is. And if that's not Curtis Sliwa, I don't know who is.
Wow, that was a great endorsement. Curtis should be so proud that you are his friend, and we send Curtis our best here on the Moment of Zen. We hope that it's a fair game, and we hope that may the best man win. We definitely love Curtis, and we love everything that he's representing, and we hope that we get our city back to safety. Now, before we go, you are going to go on the road really quickly. Tell us why you're going to take the show on the road.
Yeah, well, earlier this year, I had a chance to present at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando, Florida. And I was on a panel with a bunch of African-American libertarians and conservatives. And they brought some interesting topics to light. And everybody had a different angle. And they were all, to me, important conversations. And Angela Stanton King, she's the head of the American King Foundation, very controversial figure, helped President Trump pass the First Step Act and got a pardon from President Trump. And she's really outspoken on a lot of these issues. And she asked me to join the American King Foundation on several stops of what's called the Real Talk Tour, realtalktour.com. And I graciously accepted because I thought it was a gracious invitation. I think this is something that's needed. So we're going to be in Los Angeles, we're going to be in Miami, we're going to be in Texas and some other states between now and September, kind of bringing the most important issues that are going on, whether it's taxes, whether it's the economy, whether it's this new push for critical race theory, and so many other things, and giving you the perspective, as the left would like to say, from the black and brown perspective.
Wow, that's interesting. Is there a website that we could check out?
Yeah, you can check out realtalktour.com for future dates.
Realtalktour.com. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you on the show, Rich. It was truly an honor talking to you. You're full of such you're a plethora of information. Please do check out his podcast, This is America with Rich Valdez. It is a WABC original. Thanks for being on the show, my dear friend. I hope to speak to you again soon.
Thank you, Zen. Appreciate it.
You're listening to A Moment of Zen. I'm your host, Zen Sams, on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. We'll be right back after this.
One of the world's most recognized fashion designers is Helen Yarmak. She turned a small clothing line to an international fashion brand and is one of the few independent luxury fashion houses in the industry. Her designs for men and women are timeless and they outlast changing trends, yet they stay adaptable to your individual style. Helen's goal for her clients is to express their individual uniqueness and beauty. To learn more about her offerings, visit HelenYarmak.com or to schedule an appointment, call 212-245-0777.
Welcome back, beautiful people. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Now, Atlantic City is nearing a travel boom, and as warmer weather and vaccines arrive, people are definitely looking for the next accessible destination. Lloyd Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism, otherwise known as LIGHT, surveyed more than 800 people recently to gauge their attitudes on Atlantic City. And they basically found very strong enthusiasm for returning lovers of the world's playground. Of the 806 respondents, we have 46.4% that said that they plan to visit Atlantic City within the next 3 months. And then another 26% said that they're likely to do so in 3 to 6 months. So there are definitely things for everyone. In Atlantic City, you have beach and family fun alike. It's not just about the casinos. Storybook Land has kept the spirit of childhood alive for over 50 years. You can walk through 20 acres of storybook attractions depicting children's stories and nursery rhymes in like the cutest park setting. And I love to stay at the Ocean Casino Resort. It's definitely one of my favorite places in AC by far. Not crazy like the rest of the places, and tons of celebrity sightings filled with attractions within and around the property. But don't take my word for it. AC expert David Danzis will tell you all about this himself. He's an award-winning journalist. He's written about politics, government, education, sports, and business in New Jersey. And he's also a former staff reporter for both the New Jersey Herald and the Press of Atlantic City. He's now the lead writer for PlayNJ.com, covering Atlantic City casinos, online gambling, and sports betting. He's also received an honor or two, and we're going to ask him about that. So happy to have you on the show, my friend. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Now, I'm excited to chat AC. This is where I plan on being at least every other weekend. And I hear that there's a boom that's about to take place. Please fill us in.
Yeah, we're seeing all sorts of signs of a huge summer here in Atlantic City. From hiring events at the casinos to reinvestment at a lot of the casino properties, to just, as you mentioned in your opening, people being vaccinated and really just looking for a way to get out some of that pent-up energy that we've had over the past year. Also, all signs are pointing to a really, really positive summer here in Atlantic City.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more on the business side? I know I have a lot of listeners that are interested in beachfront properties, that have investments of the sort. We know that there's a lot of money being poured into to Atlantic City right now, and the spending spree by these casinos is positive. It's a positive sign. Collectively, there's many, not just one casino, but the industry's profits were down because of COVID, like more than 80%. But despite this, we're looking at a huge investment that's about to take place. I hear it's over 170 million. Can you break that down for us? I know Caesars has a lot going on, Hard Rock. What are the property changes that are taking place?
Yeah, actually, this year alone, we're looking at almost $250 million in casino reinvestment. So Caesars Entertainment, which operates 3 Atlantic City casinos, which would be Caesars, Harrah's Resort, and Tropicana, they've pledged about $175 million in 2021 alone. Over the next 3 years, they plan to spend about $400 million. As far as some of the other properties, Hard Rock just announced that they're going to spend $20 million. Don't forget that property just opened in 2018 after $560 million went into there to redo what used to be the Trump Taj Mahal. We're looking at reinvestment at Ocean Casino, which is going to spend about $15 million. And we've also going to see some reinvestment at Bally's Atlantic City, which has sort of been neglected over the last 15 or 20 years. We're going to see about $25 million this year and $90 million over the next 5 years. So in total, we're looking at almost $750 million over the next 5 years or so, and about $250 million in just 2021 alone.
Well, that seems promising. I mean, not just for tourism, but it seems promising for investors and for entrepreneurs alike. I know that I'm kind of turned off by the Hamptons in certain respects, although I live here in the tri-state area between the Upper East Side and New Jersey. I have residence in both locations. I feel like the Hamptons is just so oversaturated. There's a lot of lines. There's a lot of wait times. Other than the beach, there's really not that much to do. But here you have a place that like Atlantic City that has so much to offer between beach and the pier and the kids being able to run around and play during the day. Have you seen a shift in attitude? I mean, you are in Atlantic City. That's where you're living right now?
Correct. Yeah.
Have you seen a shift in people feeling like, we want to get back out there again? Many people are saying it's going to be like the roaring 20s all over again, when people just want to get out there, and the economy seems to be quite stimulated at the moment. What's your take on that and the attitude there?
Yeah, I mean, Atlantic City is really unique, not just for all of the obvious reasons, but it also happens to be one of the few places on the East Coast where there's available beachfront property. And both small-time investors and large developers are seeing that, and they're looking at it as an opportunity. And, Atlantic City has this very sort of checkered history of starts and stops, right? And booms and busts. And there's no doubt that right now we're approaching a boom period. We're coming out of what is arguably the toughest bust in the city since the Great Depression in the late 1920s. And I think what we're going to see in Atlantic City is more families starting to settle in Atlantic City. And once that happens, then you sort of have this trickle effect when it comes to property reinvestment and people buying up vacant lots and wanting to do things there. So all in all, it's not just the casinos that are contributing to this kind of rebirth of Atlantic City, which has happened several times in its history. It's smaller people looking to get involved in something that is really, really unique and is not available anywhere else in the United States, at least not on the East Coast. And that's available beachfront property. And that's a huge selling point for Atlantic City. And then I want to touch on something else that you actually talked about, and that's these other things that are happening in Atlantic City outside of the casinos. This weekend, we're actually going to see Showboat Hotel is premiering its new Lucky Snake arcade and sports bar. And this is one of those things that people have been talking about for several years now. We keep hearing kind of this, Atlantic City needs a sort of Dave and Buster's kind of concept here. And Bart Blatstein, who is a Philadelphia baser and owns the Showboat, decided to put about $7 million into the property, and he's going to open up this state-of-the-art entertainment and arcade center inside the Showboat. And that's a really important asset to Atlantic City. He also has plans to open an indoor water park with groundbreaking this summer. We're going to see a few new beach bars in Atlantic City, which is really important for tourism. Stockton University is expanding its footprint in the city. You have this focus on what's known as the EDS and MEDS, right? Stockton being a part of that. But the hospital in Atlantic City is also expanding, opening a new prenatal and maternity ward. So there's a lot of good things going on in Atlantic City. And I know the headlines kind of distract people when we talk about the tough year that the casinos had. But the reality is that Atlantic City is poised for a boom, and we're right on the precipice of that happening. And, could we see a return of the roaring 20s again in Atlantic City? I think that's a pretty safe bet that we're going to see that this summer and in the summers to come.
That makes me so happy to hear. It really does, because I'm such an AC girl. I even love Bon Jovi. I mean, I know every single song and every single lyric. And maybe it has to do with the generation that I was born in. But as the millennial mom, you know, I often fold laundry and sing, you know, Living on a Prayer or some silly song like that. And when I started the show, Ocean and I were talking about you know, them coming on board as a sponsor, and I love the girls there. They're amazing. The marketing team, they're such a great powerful women. But they're so excited that Atlantic City is going to be experiencing this boom, so to speak, and they've been gearing for a great summer season. I know that typically the season doesn't kick off till about the 4th of July there, but I think a lot of people are getting ready and getting prepared to for this comeback of sorts. And I think people want to get dressed up again. And I think a place like Atlantic City that lends itself to being able to just chill by the pool or by a beach during the day and just kind of, you know, sipping mimosas or beer or whatnot, and being able to quickly change into some, you know, very sexy attire to go to the blackjacks table while the kids are being babysat, because I know that they're going to be bringing in these great accommodations, nanny services of sorts. So I know that the properties in and around AC are gearing up for a great summer. And before we leave off very quickly, I have a question for you, and maybe you're going to be the guy who could clear this up. So I know that Caesars Entertainment completed this big $3.7 billion purchase of the William Hill in late April, and William Hill operates the most retail sports books in New Jersey. Is that correct? Do you know what is the percentage of revenue from a sports book that a casino like that really kind of, is it like a big number, the revenues coming out of the sports books for the casinos?
So this is kind of a 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other sort of question, right? The retail sports books themselves at the casinos and the 3 state licensed racetracks, you're talking only 1-2 on a good month, maybe 5% of their monthly revenue. Where the big numbers really come in and where this really starts to matter for the operators is online sports betting and mobile sports betting. You know, we've seen months where almost $1 billion have been wagered through these online and mobile sites, and that's really where the money is. As far as for the casinos, it's really just kind of an added amenity. It's something to get people onto the property. It's not a huge moneymaker for them, to be honest.
Got it. That's what I thought. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, you know what? Here to always break down everything AC for us is David Danzis. I do hope you're going to come back on the show. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. You are literally you're like the one-stop info booth to everything AC above and beyond. So thank you for coming on the show, my dear friend. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. You guys are listening to A Moment of Zen. I'm your host, Zen Sams. We'll be right back after this.
If you've missed out dining in New York City for the past year, it's time to visit the legendary Vice Cucina. Located in the heart of Midtown, Vice specializes in blending delicious Northern Italian and American cuisine with dishes such as the incredible taglione lobster, ravioli masala, ossobuco, and pappardelle al telefono, along with many other mouthwatering offerings. You deserve a great night out. Call Vice Cucina, 212-757-2600, or online at vicecucina.com.
Welcome back, beautiful people. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. Now, up next, we have Paul Ben-Victor. He's an American actor, and he's best known for playing mobster Spiros Vondopoulos on the HBO drama series The Wire. He's also slated to play mob enforcer Tony Spilotro in The Legitimate Wise Guy. He's going to be joining Harvey Keitel, Emile Hirsch, and Ruby Rose in the George Gallo-directed mobster drama, which tells the true story of Tony Spilotro, a feared mob enforcer from the crime syndicate known as the Chicago Outfit. Ben-Victor will step into this role very beautifully, and I know he will. Now I'm going to tie in the Moment of Zen Romulus movie pick of the week. Monster is my movie review. Kelvin Harrison Jr. shines in this Netflix courtroom drama. Based on the award-winning novel by Walter D. Myers, the drama is a biting, if myopic, commentary on the flawed nature of the criminal justice system. More than 3 years since its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival, friend and Anthony Mandler, who directed the film Monster, is more relevant now than ever. For one, the story of a Black teen caught on the wrong side of a racially unjust criminal justice system has become an on-screen staple, a case study in how art imitates life. The film is essentially a courthouse drama where scenes from the past and present are intercut at a dizzying pace to shape a narrative that tries hard to engage its viewers. Set in Harlem, the film's protagonist, Steve Harmon, played by Kelvin Harrison Jr., is a likable 17-year-old who attends an elite high school and aspires to be a filmmaker. Soon, though, he finds himself in a fix. He's accused of being an accessory to murder after an attempted robbery goes bad. Harmon wholeheartedly pleads his innocence despite his friends turning on him. Subsequently, he is racially profiled and left for the gallows until the steadfast defense lawyer, Catherine O'Brien, played by the amazing Jennifer Ely, steps into an attempt of a timely rescue. Now, O'Brien is met with firm opposition from the state's attorney, played by Paul Vin-Victor. Anthony Petrocelli is the character, who brands the young Harmon as a monster and assures himself of the criminal nature of the teenager by mumbling, "He looks the part to me." Chilling words. His parents, Jeffrey Wright and Jennifer Hudson, watch from the sidelines. Harmon grapples with the question of his self-worth, desperately questioning his humanity while trying to make sense of the reality he finds himself in. Paul Vin-Victor, previously spotted in critically acclaimed productions like The Wire and The Irishman, appears menacing and enthralls viewers with his poise and dialogue. His delivery is great, intensifying the central conflict in the story. To top it off, high-profile cameos from popular rappers like A$AP Rocky and Nas help in boosting this production's East Coast credentials. Despite prior speculation, the film's script is not based on true events. Rather, it's inspired by a Walter Dean Myers novel of the same name, which was the recipient of the inaugural Michael L. Prince Award for Young Adult Literature 1999. Joining us now is Paul Vin-Victor. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Zen. I'm here. Nice to be here with you.
Well, we go way back. We go way back from the acting world. But let's talk about where you're at right now and what it's like to play the roles that you've played. I mean, you've played some very impressive mobster kind of roles, and you've also played some harsh roles. I mean, in this particular movie, Monster, you know, you basically racially profile a character, and your job is to come off hard. What was it like playing this part, especially at a time like this where, you know, you feel like, am I getting another role that's casting me in the same roles as I've been playing my entire career? What was it like playing that part?
Well, to answer part of this question, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, as you know, so 38 or 1 year is like a long time. So I really feel like some of the great roles are just coming, you know, this being one of them. This was, you know, aside from judging what it's like to be playing this role in the climate of the world today, it's a great role. I opened it up. I said, this guy's a badass. This guy's a tough, you know, hard-nosed, you know, pedal to the metal prosecutor. And I was just thrilled to get a role that's like, you know, as substantial as this. And I have to drive the movie. I have to, you know, if I'm not strong, so my job, first of all, is to be as an actor, you know. I don't really judge. Sometimes I do. I'd rather not play certain roles, but this one, as you know, this is something I knew I could do in my gut, like be just another tough executive type of, you know, enforcer in a way. So I'm just doing my job as an actor, you know. So I just felt I was thrilled to just sink my teeth into something so gritty and so juicy in the language. I worked with a very good friend of mine, Phil Russell, who's an attorney, and he coached me on a lot of this stuff, and I just tried to be him. And he said I said it was just like him. So I was, you know, just being a tough attorney.
A tough attorney. And for those of you just listening in, you're listening to Paul Vin-Victor talk about his role in the movie Monster, and where the character Kelvin, depicted by Kelvin Harris Jr., depicted by, he's the lead, is met with a firm opposition from the state's attorney, Anthony Petrocelli, which is who you play, who basically you brand the young character as a monster, hence the title, and assures himself of the criminal nature of the teenager by basically mumbling, he looks the part to me, quote unquote. Now, but that's a very tough situation to be in, not only as an actor, but to be able to emotionally bring yourself to that. And you did such a great job in this movie. Talk to me a little bit about what it's been like playing these roles, because you often play the same either gangster or hardcore detective or attorney.
You know, it's funny you said, because I look at myself and I'm kind of a softie. I do have a big mouth. I can be kind of ferocious vocally, but I was always the guy, like in college, like, hold me back, boys, I'm gonna, and I'd get behind two of the big guys, like pushing them forward, like, as they're protecting me from any kind of fight that might happen. I was actually a softie. There's no way I'm throwing anything down. You know what I'm saying? I'm not that tough. I'm on the short side. I'm the short little bald guy, and so like I sometimes I look in the mirror, I go, how did you get all these, killer roles? You're slicing people's necks in the wire. I'm stabbing, I'm killing, I'm shooting, and I'm firing, big movie stars from, different shows. I mean, so it's great. I love it. I've sort of, bring on the next one. It's, if I can, it's some inner, engine ragey kind of thing that I have inside that I think, portrays this, this dangerous guy in some way, I don't know.
And what is the most, you've been acting for how many years now?
It's professionally since 82, 83, 84, 85. So okay. 35 years or so. Yeah.
Right. So this isn't your first rodeo. You've done this many times before. Yeah. You've lived this world, and you've been an actor your entire life. This is how you've made your living. And, you're blessed to be a working actor, and I'm blessed to call you my friend, because I think that working actors, I think, well, you know what I mean? Like working actors, it's not an easy thing these days to be able to pay your bills just by the art, doing what you love. So I always say I'm blessed to have a voice. I'm blessed to get up in the morning and do what I love. And I think in the acting industry or in the entire entertainment industry, all artists feel like when they've made it or when they are on their way there, that you just want to be everybody else's cheerleader, which is why I always like to have my friends come on the show, because I am the world's cheerleader. I love to highlight people and their stories, which brings me to tell us about you becoming a dad for the very first time. I'm so excited. I have chills. I have chills.
Well, we just found out, Callie and I, my sister says, well, were you trying? My sister Susie, she'll probably watch this. And I said, well, we weren't protecting.
You weren't not trying.
We weren't not trying. She goes, then you were trying.
Yeah.
Were you using protection? And I said, no, not really. She goes, then you were trying. So it's true. It's black or white. Either you are or you're not. So yes, we.
So baby girl is due when?
November 9th.
November 9th. She's going to be a Scorpio.
We did a little mini last minute reveal. We were waiting for the lab results to come in, and they didn't. And the next day they didn't, and they got mixed up with the wrong doctor. And then we finally got it. And we bought 2 cakes. We had a pink inside and a blue inside. Just we were going to have a little thing for ourselves. And we ended up videoing it for my couple of folks. And, we cut the cake and opened it. And here I was being a wacky, typical dad going nuts when it was pink. Because I really wanted a little girl, and we thought it was going to be a boy.
God bless. God bless. And how old are you? And you know what? How old are you? Hold on. I have to let our viewers know this.
Me?
Yeah.
I'll be 46 next month.
And you know what I'm going to say to you? That right now, I have a friend of mine who said to me yesterday.
I'm not 46, but we'll go with that. I'll be 23 next month.
I skipped right over it for a reason. I have a friend of mine who is, she's a friend of a friend who knows my mom. She lives in Astoria. She just turned 58. Oh. And she is having a baby.
Holy shit. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh yeah. Listen.
Miracle. Hey.
But you know what? Children are blessings, and they come, and blessings come in many forms. And I always say to people, somebody just the other day was telling me, oh, I'm 76, I'm not going to start a podcast now. And I was like, why wouldn't you start? It's never too late to have a voice. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to try.
Right.
It's always about new beginnings and thinking outside the box. And age is nothing but a number, and the limitations that we have are whatever we instill, the boundaries we set. Those are our own limitations. We are our own worst enemy, so to speak. So congratulations. Do you have a name picked out?
We're thinking about a couple of names. Lily is in the front runner right now. Lily and Callie's mother, who's passed years ago, her first name was Ardeen, which was so unique. I don't think anybody's ever heard of it, but I love it. So
Ardeen, that's a nice name.
Lily Ardeen Ben-Victor is probably where we're. Lily
and you're Italian, right? You're of Italian heritage?
No, I'm a Russian Jew.
Really?
Brooklyn,
oh my God! What an embarrassing moment. I don't even know where my guess. I should have known that, but I don't know why. Because you've always played these Italian mobster guys.
I can't get the Jewish guy roles. It's the nose. I got a fat nose, and I look like I just came out of the ring a couple of times. It's just the way I look,
Well, you had me fooled. I thought you were definitely Irish Italian. I mean, my husband, Brad Feinstein, he's Jewish. And I say, well, it's Brad Feinstein. It's not like anybody could ever get it wrong. Your last name is Feinstein.
Yeah.
But, Paul Ben-Victor is also, it doesn't strike me as a very Jewish name. No, you don't know.
You don't know. I keep them guessing. That's right.
Yeah,
that's why I've played Greeks and Russians and, Middle Eastern and couple of Spaniards, I play whoever wants me. I go.
I know you have a lot of range, and I know that Romulus Entertainment, Brad is always thinking of you. Let me tell you, you're one of Brad's favorites.
He's my favorite. He's unbelievable. Brad Feinstein. We're doing. He put me in the Mel Gibson movie Last Looks. That's I think on the horizon.
Yes, that's coming out very soon. Come on, we were on that set. We were on that set together. Where's your memory?
There you go. So that's happening in this one and Monster, and then The Banker.
You were in The Banker too. I was in The Banker. Look
at
this. This is crazy. Okay, we have a lot. We're gonna have you come on in a second show because we've run out of time. But Paul, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me, Zen.
Always nice talking to you. Thank you so much. You guys are listening to A Moment of Zen. I'm your host, Zen Sams, right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. We'll be right back after this.
One of the world's most recognized fashion designers is Helen Yarmak. She turned a small clothing line to an international fashion brand and is one of the few independent luxury fashion houses in the industry. Her designs for men and women are timeless and they outlast changing trends, yet they stay adaptable to your individual style. Helen's goal for her clients is to express their individual uniqueness and beauty. To learn more about her offerings, visit HelenYarmak.com or to schedule an appointment, call 212-245-0777.
Welcome back, beautiful people. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York. I'm your host, Zen Sams, and welcoming now to the show, we have Toby Rubenstein from the House of Faith and Fashion. Please check out the website, thehouseoffaithandfashion.com. Her book is now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kindle. Toby began her career in fashion when she was recruited by a manufacturer for Victoria's Secret, oddly enough, and then JCPenney. She moved on and she partnered with Nicole Miller for children's wear and developing Crunch's gym active wear line. Could you believe the transition this girl has had? She then went on to create Chetta, an innovative men's urban brand specifically designed for Kmart. 2009, the House of Faith and Fashion was her step into reality TV. She was basically fusing spirituality with fashion and other creative outlets. She closed Central Park South with a moving fashion show, horses and carriages and all, during one of New York's fashion weeks. And then a twist, she was ordained and found further meaning by in-depth study of Jewish thought and teaching. Very interesting. This led to the combination of both her passions into one solid purpose. But let's hear more from her directly. The birthday girl herself is joining us. Toby Rubenstein, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for wishing me a happy birthday.
So tell us why this birthday is so meaningful.
This birthday is meaningful in a way that I don't really think that I was ever really prepared for. I am now on the other end of fighting ovarian cancer, stage 4, and thankfully I'm okay. And I really put this book together in the process of my fight. So you can call it the book of my life.
Touching, the book of your life. So tell me more about the moment in time where you decided and pivoted towards writing a book, combining all of your talents from the past, all of the networks that you had created. What was that moment in time where you said, okay, I have to become an author. This is my next step?
Well, I think it came along with the diagnosis and the shock of finding out about the cancer. And I said, God is trying to tell me something. Stop procrastinating, and you're going to have to make your mission. You're going to have to manifest your mission and write this book. And it was like the last sign of saying, you got to do this. But I have been living in the house of faith and fashion my entire life. So it was just a matter of my life transporting it into a book and teaching everybody that the two subjects that are normally not together, which is any kind of spirituality and any kind of creativity, are really living within each other harmoniously, and now within the pages of my book.
Deep into weaving spirituality and fashion and bringing in editors and big brand names. And tell us more about what we can expect by reading your book.
Well, you can expect that you can learn from the costume exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which I talk about the exhibit Heavenly Bodies, which is the largest attended exhibit to date. And I talk about the original couturier was God. And the original outfit that was then copied for religious purposes and any kind of vestments was really 2 pages in the Bible that describes the high priest. There is nothing more ornate than that outfit with the embroidery, the actual dyeing of the colors. And then, of course, we can't even discuss the jewelry is the most powerful jewelry. So therefore, these things all originated in the Bible. And I have 5 chapters, and each chapter has between 12 and 15 essays that I tie these things in. I also talk to fashion editors, and I ask these spiritual questions like, do you have faith in God? Do you believe that your talent is God-given? Everybody answers me yes. And they're so happy to be asked this question because it's not about a vain situation. I'm tapping into their God-given talent, which they have.
So fashion is an art, and art helps tell stories, and it helps, it transcends a lot. And the fashion industry has kind of had some negative stereotypes. For instance, you are what you wear, or you can judge a man by his shoes, or best dress wins, or dress for success. I could go on and on. Now, as a mom, I always tell my daughter, you need to feel good about what you're wearing. Forget about what everybody else is telling you to wear and what the trends are. You need to put something on and feel comfortable and love that outfit, whatever that represents to you. What advice do you have to all the fashionistas out there who are literally living and being defined by the fashion trends and the seasons?
Well, we're living in wonderful times now where the fashion trends and the seasons have been eradicated by us being home and now emerging into real life again. So we've begun to realize that those things really don't matter. And I really do believe that you have to dress your inside, then projects it out to your outside. And don't worry about trends, and don't worry about what the world dictates to you. You have to worry about your own inside and your individuality and who you are, and then let that be represented into what it is you're wearing. We're all now struggling for our new identity, and therefore, you can tap into the inside now. It's okay to come out and reveal yourself.
right here on the Moment of Zen. I'm going to move on to I'm going to move on to the next question about sustainability. So the global apparel market is expected to recover and grow from what I read 527 billion in 2020 to 635 billion in 2021. Okay, so we're going up a little bit. That was the latest. That's the latest fashion industry statistic. That's what they're telling us. But both consumers and brands are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of sustainable fashion. Obviously, a lot of these fashion shows that are produced are not sustainable. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars paid out for a 30-second runway show. Designers have realized that this is not the way to go anymore. What do you want to see change in the fashion industry in terms of sustainable fashion based on where we are in this digital process?
Ooh, this is a loaded question. I do have an essay in the book called Sustainability is a Recycled Idea, because that also comes from the Bible. And I could prove it because the within the Holy Temple, the wicks of the menorah were made out of recycled linen from the priest outfits. That's what the women did. They recycled everything. So in order to learn that teaching and understand that there is, we have a planet to protect, and garments are holy and they need to be repurposed and rearranged in order for us to be able to either come up with a new outfit or even tap into an outfit that somebody else wore. So I really think we have a huge responsibility, but can I solve this question with a definite answer for you now? No, but I see that we're on our way, and it's a good thing to be on our way without having an absolute answer.
On our way is good, as long as we're moving. Okay, I have another female-driven question here. So the fashion industry is driven by women. We spend 3 times as much on clothing as men and occupy the majority of entry-level positions. And companies that manage to be diverse and inclusive are among the biggest success stories in fashion and retail. But while many companies have committed themselves to increasing gender diversity, progress has been slow, very slow. Do you think we need to see more women in charge in the fashion industry?
I'm gonna answer that question by saying something completely obvious and possibly just stupid. Yes. If we're the ones that are buying, the ones that are buying the most, of course, we should be at the helm of the industry. I have broken so many glass ceilings by being the first of women that I'm so used to having those kind of scars. So I think that women, as they become stronger, more vocal, and more sure of themselves, I think, again, I'm going to answer that question saying, I think we're making very good progress. And there's no such things as immediate answers, as long as we're moving in the right direction of making sure that females have their place in the board of directors of very large apparel companies.
That's exactly my point. More women need to take a stance here, and we need to allow that diversity to happen. And you yourself are a powerhouse. To publish a book, to be an author of a book is an incredible accomplishment. We were talking about it behind the scenes with our producer, that not everybody just gets to publish a book, but you did that so effectively, and it's such a beautiful book. You guys have to check her out. Toby, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was such a pleasure talking with you.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So you guys are listening to A Moment of Zen. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Please do check out my friend Toby Rubenstein, thehouseoffaithandfashion.com. We'll be right back after this.